Sonic CrossWorlds, the next Sonic racing game, is releasing in about a week or so, but before its launch, they had a few demos come by. One was an online PS5 test, a few others were at conventions, and the most recent one is an open network test for all consoles and PC. And I finally got to join that demo and play for myself, so here's my quick thoughts. I was initially skeptical about the game for a few reasons. One being that the PS5 demo was really chaotic with heavy item spamming. More info was focused on the music or other features, but I was still concerned about the online play and item balancing. So jumping in, I was curious if they adjusted the balancing and also wanted to see if the game was fun to begin with. And straight to the point, yes, it's fun, and yes, things are more balanced. I should start with the basic stuff first. Jumping in, the vehicles felt a lot heavier than I expected. Your handling isn't as flexible as other kart racers, but it just takes some getting used to. Controls were also mapped with acceleration on A, drift on R, and items on L. But I'm much more used to how previous Sonic racers controlled with accelerate on R, drift on L, and items on A or B. Thankfully, they do allow you to change that in the settings, so I gladly use that instead. They do have tricks on the left stick though, which makes turning in the air a lot harder. And while you can use the right stick for tricks too, you can't disable it on the left stick. I didn't mind it that much, but I would have liked an option for it. Anyways, CrossWorlds is a kart racer with familiar mechanics. Drive and drift better than others, use items to your advantage, and get rings for minor speed buffs. The extreme gears / hoverboards have also returned, labeled as boost type vehicles. They obviously don't control like any Sonic Riders games, but work like the bike equivalent to the game's normal cars. Either way, I like their inclusion and implementation. There's also a few air and water sections, which have you either fly through the air or race on water. I thought these sections were good for breaking up the normal kart sections, but I'm kinda mixed on the water sections having a jump button instead of a drift button. It makes them different from normal karts, but it feels weird not having a drift for tight turns. But the air and water segments were completely fine. There's no real problems I could think of. The main gimmick of the game is the warp rings, sending everyone to a completely different track on the second lap, which is chosen by the racer in first place. I thought this would have been a really basic mechanic that wouldn't really add much, but it actually made races a lot more interesting. It's a small random factor that has you immediately adapt to whatever's chosen, which makes a normal race slightly unpredictable and different. It also makes for nice revisits to old places from previous games. Even niche or lesser known areas make an appearance, like Dinosaur Jungle or Water Palace. I thought the Crossworld gimmick was pretty fun, but I can also see the mechanic getting a bit stale after a long time. But that's also where Frenzy Time can kick in. When Frenzy Time is enabled, CrossWorld segments can have a random effect applied, like more boost rings, infinite boost items, or super fast drifting. It helps to make the CrossWorld sections a bit more varied, which helps if you've played through the same tracks for a while. It's a nice extra game changer when it comes by, but it's also up to chance if it happens. Over time, you'll also unlock gadgets to equip between races. These are small perks that can add or adjust certain actions, like a faster drift charge, more item slots, or a higher ring cap. The system allows for some nice combinations, and from what I know, there's no overpowered or broken builds you can make. Gadgets don't really grant you a free win, it still largely depends on your skills to get first place. But they're very flexible in helping you play a certain way if you want. You can make a build focused on item hoarding, or maybe one solely focused on ring collecting. I made a really nice set that basically allowed drift boosting on straights, snaking in other words. But I realized that even if it's slightly faster than normal, it's actually not that helpful in a real race where items are present. So although it seemed overpowered, it really wasn't. But it's still cool that I was able to make something like that. As for the tracks that were available, I really liked most of them, but I did have some small issues. Apodos has a really cramped hallway at the start, which makes it awkward to race through. Mystic Jungle's water slides were way too easy to drive off of, especially when drifting. Skyroad's second shortcut has a surprisingly sharp turn, which you basically have to brake for. And Sand Road opens the water section on the final lap, but still has the original path open, which is clearly slower, so I don't know why it's not blocked off. There's also a few turns that kinda felt impossible to take without bumping into the outer wall. Maybe vehicles with better handling can manage just fine, but I found myself hitting the walls pretty often. Thankfully it doesn't stop drift charges, but it also leads to some ring loss, so there is a small penalty. It might also be due to the game's more chaotic structure. I know I said that the item balancing was a lot better, but that doesn't mean everything else is more relaxed. So, for the record, this game is developed by the team behind some Sega arcade racers. And with that knowledge in mind, you can really see those arcade roots throughout the game. Players crashing into each other, rings dropping from collisions, the flashy drift meter, the frantic frenzy mechanic. You don't even stop moving when you hit some walls head on. Instead of bonking and stopping, you just sort of rub against it and pass on. The game wants you to keep moving to stay in the action and keep you engaged for every race. I know kart racers always have some level of mayhem to them, but this is on a completely new level and it's pretty obvious too. It feels almost overstimulating, like it's trying so hard to keep your attention, just like all the brain rot left online. But this isn't an arcade racer trying to keep you playing and take your quarters, it's a normal kart racer. Granted, the insanity of every race gives the game that unique quality, but I kinda wish it was toned down a bit. That, so far, is probably my biggest issue with the game. It's just a bit too crazy when I feel it really doesn't need to be, because under all the chaos is a remarkably solid and enjoyable racing game. I really like the gadget system, the controls, the customization, and the course design. And even then, it really isn't that big of an issue to me, but I can certainly see it being a bit overwhelming to some. But maybe that's what makes it alluring for others. At the very least, I can understand what's going on past the visual noise. The good use of distinct sound effects makes everything a bit more understandable, which helps out gameplay-wise, but it drowns out a lot of the music. I was initially skeptical of the music since the small samples we've heard weren't really appealing to me, but I tried keeping an open mind and found most of the tracks pretty catchy. Not all of them were great, but in the middle of a race I found the music good more often than not. The little intros for each course were nice openers to the track, with Wonder Museums being a highlight. I thought Dragon Road was one of the best music tracks simply because it was both really good on its own and enhanced the frenetic stage scenery. It's just too bad that all the sound effects kinda overpower the music. To be fair, I could have lowered the sound volume in the settings, but it wasn't a big enough issue to make me do that. Visually, I thought the game looked amazing, but had some shortcomings. Courses looked great, characters were mostly fine, and for an Unreal Engine 5 game there was no shader compilation stutter, which was pretty shocking. I doubt many people even know what shader compilation stutter even is, but just believe me, it's a good thing it's not here. Customization is also way more in depth than I expected. There's options for material changes, horn sounds, the cockpit colors, and even aura effects. But unfortunately the aura disappears during races, which kinda sucks and defeats the whole purpose. I had some smaller issues outside of that too. Character lip syncing wasn't exactly great, but it wasn't terrible or anything. The game consistently ran at a smooth 60 FPS, but it's maxed at 60, so no options for 120 FPS. Some crowds also ran at a distracting lower frame rate, which wouldn't be so bad if they didn't have them so close to you. A few menus and transitions also ran at a lower frame rate, which doesn't look too great. There's also the use of TSR as an anti-aliasing method, which leads to some visual artifacts showing up sometimes. But it's not really the game's fault, and they still give you an option to change that, so it's not all bad. A weird visual quirk of the game is that it has two different camera options, original and dynamic. Original is just the default normal camera, but Dynamic has the camera a bit lower and I think has a wider FOV or something. But Dynamic makes the game look and feel a lot faster than the original camera, which probably should have been the default option. I used Original for a bit, but stuck with Dynamic for the rest of my playtime because the sense of speed was just better. I'm not sure why there's two options when one is clearly better, but at least the option is there to begin with. Also, Joker from Persona 5 was unlocked a few days into the online test demo, but since Joker is considered DLC, there's unfortunately some compromises in terms of his character. Firstly, no voice lines, no cheers, shouts, or even grunts. Only sound effects from Persona 5 play alongside exclusive music to his character. That also means the usual rival interactions are completely one-sided, so that's already a pretty big letdown. Secondly, there's a lack of certain animations. When entering races, he sits idly in a car or stands completely still on a hoverboard like a statue, unlike the animations or poses that the other characters do. And lastly, it's just a character in a racing game, which is substantially less game-changing than, say, a DLC character in a fighting game. Unless Joker comes with a unique DLC course, the only things he adds are purely cosmetic and nothing more. His unique card can have slightly different stat numbers, but the class type is all that really matters. To be fair, Joker alongside a few others are free DLC, but there's also plans for paid DLC characters and courses as well. While the courses may be worth their value, I'd find it hard to pay for just a character, especially if they're missing a few things like Joker is. As for the online play, I think it's much more balanced than before. Again, I didn't play the last online demo, but I heard it was way too chaotic to play comfortably. So with this demo, things were a lot less hectic in comparison. And even with all the gadgets available, there was never a player or build that was too overpowered or unbeatable, at least from what I could tell. It's still a bit crazy sometimes, but that's a given for most online racing experiences. Normal races online were pretty fun overall. During the second to last day of the online demo, there was also a festival event based around Joker and Persona 5. This changed the free-for-all races into team-based ones with special rules. Teammates can tap each other for a small boost, and when that's done enough times, it fills a meter that has your team boost with invincibility for a short time. There were also two other modes based on ring collection and air tricks, which were basically the same but had rings or tricks also added to the boost meter. Once races are done, points are added for all teams, and those with more taps, rings, or tricks are given bonus points depending on the rule set. I found the festival a nice game changer from the normal races, and the focus on teams felt like a nice nod to Team Sonic Racing. But at the same time, it made races a lot more frantic and less balanced. Items feel a lot more powerful than normal, and it feels like no matter how well you do, it's always a roll of the dice with how well your teammates perform. So even with a strong first or second place, it doesn't matter at all if your teammates finished in lower ranks. So it just feels less rewarding altogether. Wins were still satisfying, and with the proper teamwork, it feels insanely good to win. But the randomness of items and teammates just isn't worth it. It's still a lot of fun, but I'm not too big on the team setup, especially with randoms. Maybe with a group of friends and proper coordination, it's a lot better, but I wasn't able to try that. As for general network stability, it's already better than Team Sonic Racing since that was broken by day 1. But CrossWorlds isn't exactly perfect either. It was nearly flawless on my first few sessions, but midway through it felt like a network error showed up once every 5 games or so. There weren't any real bugs throughout all my playtime, but I ran into one big glitch in an online race where someone got to the second lap way earlier than everyone else, and then the warp ring to the final lap didn't work. The game warped us to the final lap, so we did finish, but that's a pretty bad glitch that needs serious fixing. Thankfully, that's the only major glitch I ever ran into. There was a small one where I landed on the ground and it was apparently considered a wall hit, but that really didn't matter that much. I also started grinding on the edge of the road at one point, but that was my fault more than anything. The online experience wasn't too bad. Wait times were tolerable, it gave me enough time to customize my vehicles and gadgets, and load times weren't too bad either. Although that's probably because I'm on PC, so who knows how the other versions differ. There is crossplay too, so I think the stability was fine overall, but it just needs a bit more work. So far, the CrossWorlds online test has given me a good sample of how the game plays, and it's a relatively solid and enjoyable experience. It's a big departure from previous titles, but it's to the game's benefit. There's a good layer of polish all around, mechanics seem fine-tuned and balanced fairly well, and there's not too many problems I have so far. Apparently, there's also going to be a demo out mid-September with some offline races only, so everyone can try the game for themselves. I do think this is a bit of a solution to address a little exploit found in the open network demo. People playing on PC were able to put in some codes to try the offline races and locked tracks before the network test even went live. So I'm assuming this is a way to just patch up that problem and let everyone play the demo. Or maybe they had the demo planned out regardless. I do think that if you want to buy the full game, you should still try the demo first, because the full game's going to be a whole $70 up front. And for a racing spin-off game, that's a big pill to swallow, especially with the paid DLC content, Season Pass, and a digital deluxe version. There's a handful of free DLC characters coming as post-launch content, so technically you could consider that worth the extra $10 of value, but that's assuming that the free DLC characters are even worth that much. And considering the missing animations and voice lines that Joker had, I kinda doubt it will be. There's an official statement out there that says that voice lines are missing because it would be too much work between external companies to review lines of character interactions. But they could have easily dropped the interactions as they already have now and still added in some voice clips for tricks and stuff. I don't know if it's time or budget constraints or maybe just cutting corners, but that's a pretty lame excuse. I'm hoping that mods on PC can just add voices later on because it kind of ruins the point of the collaboration to begin with. I'd say right now that you should just wait for the game to drop in price after a while. Maybe the game will be worth $70, but I hardly believe that'll be the case. But that's just my impressions so far. The full game still isn't here yet, so I can't judge the entire game's worth right off the bat. So when the game releases, I'll probably give it a look then, assuming I even buy the game to begin with. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe, or don't, that's up to you, and I'll see you later.